Hey, Student Success! Welcome to week 4 of the session. So after this week, you're officially halfway done with the second 8-week course. So this is a week that runs from April 11th through the 17th, which I understand that runs into Easter for anyone who is celebrating that this weekend. So just keep that in mind as you're planning your week. So week 4, as we go down, of course, please remember your student services assignment. I'll talk about that more in our assignment video. But week 4, as we look in here, this covers 3 chapters. So what I'm going to do is you're actually going to have 4 videos this week, chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 8, and then the assignment videos. So that way you are getting those in smaller chunks instead of one large video. So we are going to go ahead and take a look at chapter 5. So I'm going to get into the materials folder, and I'm going to use the link that takes me right to chapter 5. I'm also going to pull up the chapter 5 slides. So chapter 5 talks about reading to learn. So in this chapter, the key takeaways is just viewing reading differently than you might from your high school experiences. Because according to the College Reading Learning Association, approximately 85% of what we learn in college is done through reading. And so that is a huge amount of responsibility that we have to take on for what we read. Oftentimes that is taking place outside of class on our own, for homework or for study time or online courses. And so we really do need to make sure that we are taking the information in and spending the appropriate amount of time to understand. So kind of a rule of thumb is to spend about 2 or more hours on homework, most of it reading, for every hour you spend in class. Now obviously that's going to differ based on the class that you're in. Some classes you're going to need that, maybe more. Some classes you're not going to need that much. But it's just a nice thing to keep in mind that you need to build that time into your schedule. And it is one of the primary ways, as I mentioned, that we do learn and absorb new ideas. Okay, so these are the steps of our active reading cycle in this chapter that they talk about. And so if you don't already use some of these, the point of this chapter is to try to encourage you to start incorporating some of these steps into your reading process. And so when we talk about preparing to read, this means whenever you sit down, you might already preview, you might already do this. How many pages do I have to read? That's a part of preparing to read, knowing how long the reading is going to be, because that can help you plan your time. So if you know that you have like a 50-page chapter, you're not going to knock it out in 10 minutes. So you have to prepare how you're going to approach this. You also have to know what purpose you are reading. Are you reading because you have a test, because you have to write a paper? What is your purpose? Because you should approach it differently based on your purpose. Take a section or a few minutes to read through your sections. So look at the titles and subtitles. How is everything organized? Are there graphics? Are there keywords? Are there summaries or introductions? So really get a chance to see how the author has organized their writing. This is going to help you preview. It's going to make connections to try to think about your prior knowledge and connect it to what you're about to learn. So all of those are ways to preview and start getting ready to read, along with obviously like having your materials, having your notebook, having your writing utensils, having an access to something that you may have to look up extra resources on, whatever that might look like. You will also be, setting, if you don't already have a purpose, sometimes the instructor will give you the why. Like, hey, you need to read this because you have a discussion post, but sometimes they won't. They'll just say, hey, read chapter 3, see you next week. And so you might have to come up with your own purpose. And so if you've ever felt like as you read, you just kind of like glaze over the page and by the end you don't remember what you've read, it's probably because you've been more passive in your reading. And so setting a purpose can help you be more active. And so if you don't already have a why you're reading, make one. By the end of this chapter, I want to define 10 vocabulary words, or by the end of this chapter, I want to be able to summarize it in my own words. Set a purpose. That's going to help motivate you. It's going to help you stay a little bit more focused as you read. Now you're going to actually start reading. So as you have already previewed, you've already taken some time, maybe you've looked at the chapter questions, you have a guide that you're going through to answer questions, or you've set your own questions. Maybe back in this preparing to read part, you look through the headings and you turn those into questions. That's a great way to stay focused. Look at different headings, turn those into questions, and as you read, look for the answer to those questions. So as you start to actually do the reading, what are you looking for? Are you looking for answers to questions? Are you looking for definitions? What do you already know about this topic? How are you going to connect it to what you are about to learn? Connect it to the class, connect it to your major, whatever that might look like. Here's some other things you want to do. It says while you're reading, do these things, but don't quite start taking notes or highlighting yet. We're going to talk about why. So look for those answers to the questions. Think about how all of the ideas are connected to one another. Skim through sections if they're not related to your key questions, and then chunk up your reading. So if you have a 15-page chapter, don't read all 15 pages at once. Read 5 pages. Stop. Think about what you just read. Do you understand what you read? If you don't, go back to page 1 and only read those 5 pages again. If you've ever read like 20 pages and realized you got to page 20 and you have no idea what you've been reading since page 1, you've wasted a lot of time. But if you can read in sections, that way you're not getting too overwhelmed. And if you do get lost, you only have a few pages to go back and revisit. Okay, so really look at those type of things. Okay, so now you can go ahead and go back and look again, look for the answers to your questions, look for the keywords, look for things to try to start putting in your memory. Also, while you read, you should not take notes or highlight or underline. Because if you've ever highlighted, you might highlight and then look at your page and you've highlighted almost most of the page. It's because while we read, we think everything's important. And so we want to read, stop, and then go back and highlight or underline or annotate. And after you read a section, you can kind of have a moment to look and say, okay, what was actually the most important part of this page? You should have around 25% of your page highlighted, underlined, or taken notes on. More than that, and you're really not getting the meat out of it, you're just writing down everything. So kind of keep that as a guidepost as you read. And then, of course, you want to review. Even if you don't have a test or a quiz, you want to review. Take some time to go back and refresh your memory. What did you read? Fill in any gaps in your notes. Answer those questions. Merge any notes that you took with class notes or lecture notes. Make a study guide, talk with another student, all those things that you want to do to help cement what you've read. Okay, so chapter 5, then the actual chapter will go into a little bit more detail with all of those things. What does it mean to read to learn? So this is going to go through that reading process I just talked to you about, and this gives you some examples of different textbook features and how you can approach those. This is also going to talk to you about if you have special textbooks that you're working with, like different foreign language texts or math tests or texts or anything like that, how you could potentially improve those readings. Building your vocabulary. The more vocabulary we know, the better our comprehension is. But even if you don't have a large vocabulary, making sure that you use context clues to try to figure out the meanings of words. You use word parts, anything like that that's going to help you build your vocabulary. And so this section talks to you a little bit about how to go about building your vocabulary while you're reading, as well as some suggestions, outside of that. All right, so I encourage you, if reading is an area in which you struggle or you just need to brush up on, take a look more in chapter 5, really look at those nitty-gritties so that you're familiar with those tips. And then I will be back with a chapter 7 video shortly. Thanks.